Guys, it is Marcus and Terry with you here on the fancy new year. Hope you guys had a good new year and stayed sober. But if not, that's why we're here. So don't worry about it. So, what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about the idea of dry January. What is dry January? How does it work? Does it work? And what's the whole idea behind it? So, Terry, I know you said you saw something about dry January on the news today. How you doing, and what was that about?
That's right. They were suggesting that people make January a dry January and just go. It benefits all parts of your health and
Mhm.
just they were just saying how people it'll help your productivity, your health, and all sorts of things. And I think they were really talking to the non-alcoholic, really, but
Mhm.
maybe the alcoholic as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because oftentimes those things are like a springboard to weed the alcoholics out. And what I find is like for me and Terry, willpower wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to just say, "Hey, I'm going to have this New Year's resolution to stay sober." We would find that maybe you'd be able to stay sober a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. 3 weeks was kind of my maximum. And then I would always go back again. And what we're going to do in this talk is we're going to talk about why that is. Why is it that you set up these resolutions? And I want you to know that you're kind of not alone if you have failed resolutions. Studies from what I've seen show that the average person that sets a resolution, whether it's to lose weight, get fit, stop eating certain foods, stop drinking, make more money, whatever it is, they usually end up abandoning that goal right around January 11th. So I think you got, 8 days left when most people are going to be failing. And if you don't believe this statistic, go to the gym today, look at all the people in the gym, and then come back in a couple of weeks and tell me if they're all still there. Because chances are a lot of people abandon it. And it's interesting because I find that most people abandon their goals because it's not doing something for them immediately. And Terry, I'm sure you know, as alcoholics, we love immediate gratification. You got anxiety, you hit the bottle. You're depressed, you hit the bottle. It's an instant relief. Sometimes, like we've talked about on this channel before, even before you actually consume it. You might just feel better just having it around or whatever it is, right? Can you relate to that, Terry? What's your experience with instant gratification and wanting to feel better and all that stuff?
Well, sure. Instant gratification for as far as alcohol is concerned. I never made any resolutions to quit alcohol when I
Mhm.
was in the depth of my alcoholism. Um, I I couldn't quit. There was no way I could quit for even 6, 7 hours.
Mhm.
So, but I know a lot of people. I work with a lot of alcoholics, and I see a lot this time of year that a lot more people are trying to quit for good. And it's just like the gym. You see a ton of them in the rooms or wherever
Mhm.
that are determined this time they're going to get it right. This time they're going to stay stopped, and within a couple weeks or so, they end up going out, and I don't see them again.
Yeah, exactly. And that's an interesting thing because, we want the result. Like, I remember years and years, I would try to stop, I would try to quit, and I would really feel it. I'd be like, yes, this is going to be the time. And I mean, if you guys have ever seen my bookshelves, they're loaded with books like Why Don't I Do What I Want to Do? Why Do I Do What I Don't Want to Do? Willpower, all kinds of stuff about willpower. And when I was in the heights of my drinking, I thought willpower would solve it. I'm a businessman. We talk about business goals, we talk about willpower, and for some reason I just couldn't stop. So like the idea of a dry January, right? A lot of people say, I want to have a dry January. And how many of you guys here came here because you're like, hey, I want to try to quit drinking for a month or more than a month or whatever it is, and maybe you find yourself trapped. Maybe you've quit over and over. Maybe you're the kind that drinks and you get drunk all the time, and you're like me and you hated being drunk. I hated it. Every morning I would wake up and be like, what the hell did I do? And then it was not enough. I was in the cycle and I just kept drinking around the clock and I was unable to stop. Now, I was able at certain points to string together 3 weeks at the most. Now, I know studies show that it takes like 28 days to make or break a habit, or 21 days or something like that, to make or break a habit. And I would make it to like that point, but not even more. I was never able to go more. And it was interesting because I would have that resolution and I'd say, this is what I wanted. And I believed it with all of my heart. And I was like, I want to stop. But for some reason, I'd end up at lunch one day and I'd be like, hey, let me have a Diet Coke and a beer. And I'd have the beer, and then I'd wake up 3 days later and say, what the hell happened? Who ordered the beer, right? It was kind of like there was some kind of automatic process in my mind that went and said, I'll have a beer with it. And, I thought I was doing good because I had the Diet Coke also. I wasn't even having a real Coke. I was having a Diet Coke and a beer. That's got to be good, right? And my resolutions just fell flat on their face. And I remember promising to myself, promising to my kids, my wife, this is going to be it. I remember one Christmas, I wrote my kids a letter and I was like, this is going to be it. And I wanted it to be it. And I wanted to stop really bad, but I just wasn't able to, right? I wasn't able to make it through the month. Maybe I'd be able to go and say, well, hey, I could do 3 weeks. So I got this under control. But the illusion of control is something that the alcoholic really has to deal with. So for those of you who are here and you're like, I want to have a dry January, I want to make that happen. And that's what I want to do. And a lot of people look at it for the goals. Like I remember, and Terry, let me know if this is the same for you. But I remember when I wanted to quit drinking, I had this list of things that I wanted to happen. I was like, okay, I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to feel better. I'm going to start working out. I'm going to be smarter. I'm going to make more money. I'm going to do more stuff in my business. And I had all these positives that I thought would happen when I stopped drinking. And that was kind of my motivation for stopping drinking. And I didn't really see the process that was really going on, right? What's going on behind the scenes? Because in rehab, I remember they told us, it's kind of like this. And what you see is this here, right? And that's not Patrick Starr's head. Yes, I watch too many cartoons with my kid. That is an iceberg, right? And we have the iceberg here. And let's see if this blue pen will work, or we'll just use green. Right? And we have the iceberg here, and we have our water, right? And our water's here, okay? And now we see the iceberg. And the iceberg is like, hey, you know what? This drinking stuff sucks. I feel like shit. And I think it's probably because of what my mom did or what my dad did or because I lost my job or whatever, right? This iceberg says reasons. Here's the reasons that I drink. And Terry, did you have reasons? Did you have a list you could go to where it's like, well, I don't want to drink today, but, and you're like this, you get your notepad out and you're like, okay, well, I got this list of reasons. Okay, here's 1, 2, 3. And you're like that. And you're like, man, yeah, I got a lot of reasons, right? So what was that like for you, right? You had all these reasons and what went on in your head?
Oh, I drank when I was sad or when I was stressed, hard day work, come home, better have a nice stiff cocktail, and then that would always end up to be 10 or more or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Or I would drink to celebrate something great happened.
Mm-hmm.
And every reason under the book, of course. And what made me actually quit, you talked about the list of things that you were going to get when you got sober, things that you were going to do, like get healthier and make more money, and I had that same list. I think you actually read my list right there or something like that. But for me, what ended up getting me to quit drinking was that the next thing I was going to lose. It didn't end up being what I was going to gain. It was what I was going to lose, and that was at that point that was my life.
So that was consequences.
It was the consequences that made me quit, and what we're trying to do here is get people to learn to quit before they get all these terrible consequences. That's generally what makes people eventually quit for good, is these consequences become so big. Mm-hmm. And it's a difficult thing to do. Many people just lose everything, including their home and their family, and some people actually lose their life, and it's hard, and it's hard to realize that the consequences just continue to get worse and worse. And we want to try to get people to understand to recognize the signs of their addiction and how things are progressing, and eventually learn to quit before things get too terrible and you lose everything.
Yeah. And I think I could be wrong. I could be too low on my estimate, but I think the estimate is that 88,000 people a year die as a direct result of alcoholism, which is insane. Like that's a lot of people. And we look at it and we're like, okay, well, what's the deal? Because do we need to wait for a consequence? Like for those of you here that are like, hey, I just want to drink less for the new year, or I want to stop drinking for a month, or whatever it is, right? Do we need to wait for the consequences to happen? And the definition of an alcoholic is someone who continues to drink even though there's negative consequences in their life. So if you're drinking and you're like, well, I'm about to lose my job because I don't show up every day because I'm hungover and I feel like shit, or I'm about to lose my spouse, or maybe I got a DUI and I can't drive anymore, or maybe it's affecting my health and the doctor's like, dude, if you keep drinking, you're going to screw your life up. And I heard a story of someone who they told that to. They're like, hey, this is going to kill you if you keep drinking. And he kept drinking. Right, so we got to look at that and we got to say, okay, well, what's the deal? Over here we have like willpower. Okay, a lot of people say willpower is the deal. Are you just weak? Like, is the reason you keep drinking because you are weak? Are you weak-willed? Are you not strong enough? Are you a can't hack it, waste who just can't do it? Which is what I thought. I self-punish myself all the time because I'm like, Marcus, you can build a business. Marcus, you can do this. Marcus, you can do that. Why can't you conquer a freaking bottle of alcohol? Why? What's the deal? And for me, I looked at it and I was like, okay, I got this willpower. All right, I had willpower. Like I was pretty good at things I wanted to do. When I wanted to do them, I did them. Now, I also had some struggles in some other areas, but when it came to alcohol, I thought, hey, we can do it. Like doing 3 weeks. Hey, I could quit for 3 weeks. That's willpower, right? Like Terry's like, dude, I couldn't quit for 7 hours. So there's some willpower involved there. But moral of the story, it took us both to the end of where we wanted to be, to where it's like, holy shit, I need to get sober. Something's going on here that's not having to do with willpower, that's not having to do with this. And so what happens is we have willpower, we have consequences, we have goals, we have good things that might happen, we have reasons we might drink. And we're looking at this. Now, all of this might sound like a lot. You're like, dude, seriously, if I got my willpower, my reasons, and my consequences down pat, then boom, it would happen. I remember dealing with my brother who's also an addict, and we're like, okay, the second DUI should do it. I mean, you would think that's gonna do it. Like, seriously, you got family issues, you got all this stuff, you got this DUI, you can't drive, and his career is where you have to drive for a living. Like, not a truck driver, but he has to go on appointments and stuff all the time. So it wouldn't work. So you would think that would work. Now, luckily, from what I heard last, my brother is sober now, I think 90 days, which is awesome. And so we look at that and we're like, why was that not enough, right? We have all this stuff. Now, what we're doing is we're looking at the tip of the iceberg, right? Now, what people don't talk about, because we have all these things. My mom was bad. I got anxiety. I'm depressed. I lost my job. We have all these reasons that we want to stop. So we go like, hey, I'm going to have dry January. I'm going to stop. Got these reasons. We're going to stop. But you're not seeing that beneath the surface of the water, there's this big-ass iceberg. Now, this big-ass iceberg is not as big as your reasons. It's not as big as your willpower. It's not as big as the consequences, but it's one little caveat, actually 2 caveats, that will make it very difficult to stop, if not damn near impossible, without outside help. So, what is that? What's going on behind the surface? Well, I just read an article the other day, and we're going to put a video up on it later this week, maybe next week. And it was an article that I saw on the homepage of MSN, which means, hey, it's pretty popular. And it was talking about the 5 most dangerous addictive substances. Alcohol was number 4. Now, why is it dangerous? Well, it talked about the physical addictive properties. So here, you look at this, and this stuff, your reasons and everything, and Terry, you could probably relate to this and add some stuff. Your reasons are mental. You're like, okay, I got this. I'm going to quit because my wife wants me to, or whatever, right? And these are all mental. You're like, this is the mental game, okay? And you can fight that mental game. And for me and Terry, we lost, right? I
Right.
lost that game. I was like, I can't outthink my alcoholism. Terry, what was that like for you?
Oh, it was exactly the same. I couldn't outthink the alcohol. I obsessed over it constantly. And when I did quit, and this is why I would continue to go back, is when I would stop,
Mm-hmm.
I it was on my mind constantly. And I know some people like they've this one woman she talks about it a lot how she was sober for 11 years and then started drinking again. And she said that during that 11 years, every minute of every day she was thinking about the drink.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I can't do that. I have to be able to live life without having that constant obsession.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you take that drink, then that constant obsession of that mind
Mm-hmm.
gets coupled with the physical craving of it. And then that's when it just becomes impossible. Willpower is not going to do anything. You have to drink. And
Exactly.
at least that's the experience that I had, definitely.
Well, and that's kind of like you guys see this in your own life with other things, right? Like when you're hungry, your defenses are down. Like if I was to take you and put you in a room and you're like, hey, I'm the strongest person. Like let's say we take like, I don't know, Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's strong and powerful and buff and all that stuff, right? He's like, hey, there I am. I'm tough. It's not going to beat me, right? If I was to put him in a room and not give him food for like 5 or 6 days, his mental capacity is going to be off. Right now, it's not that he's weak. It's not that he's whatever. It's that that's how the human body works. You go run a marathon after a really bad, strenuous marathon. It's really hard to be anxious. Right? You don't have anything left in you to be anxious. Like Terry goes and he rides bikes all over the place, miles and miles, hundreds of miles, and he rides them. And at the end, like if they're like, hey, get up on stage and say something, even if he's afraid of talking, he's going to be so tired out from the ride that he's not going to be as anxious as he would be if he wasn't. Does that make sense, Terry?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what happens. Hey, I wanted
Yeah.
to just say hi to a couple people real quick here.
Yep.
Sonish, hello, and Evan. I see all your comments. We'll get to them in a few minutes. And you've got some good things to say. And THC Gamer, sorry you relapsed again. It's all good. You're here now, man, and you can stay sober. So you got 12 days now. That's great. 12 days is huge.
Yep.
So we'll talk to you guys in just a little bit here.
Cool.
Hey, Randy.
And that's the whole relapse thing. I kind of see them as one and the same, where it's like, okay, you have this stuff down here. Now, this is the big bulk of it because you can't outthink it if your mind is warped. Right? If we took the Arnold Schwarzenegger, put him in the room, took him without food at the end of 5 days, big buff dude is going to be like, man, I would do anything for food because that's what my mind wants. It's in survival mode, right? So what happens, it's kind of like if you were to read Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, he has this idea of the hierarchy of needs where it's like, okay, you have your base needs on the bottom, food, shelter, safety, right? And once those are met, then you go up and you're like, well, now I want community and family. Then I want love, then sex, then, all these things. And it goes up to a pillar of like the pinnacle of what the humans want. But at the base level, at the bottom, it's always food, survival, whatever. Now, I don't care if you're at the top pinnacle and you think you have reached nirvana. If you take away those bottom things, even the big king of the world with all the gold is going to be brought to nothing because that's how the physical body works. Doesn't matter how much money he has. Doesn't matter how powerful he is. Doesn't matter anything. If you take the food away, take the water away, the dude's going to wither, right? That's why like fasting and religion is important. And I don't know, to each his own. It might be important to you or not to others. But the reason it works the way it does is because it takes down your normal mental capacities and makes you kind of like in a pliable, bendable state, right? So when we're dealing with this is what alcohol is doing. Alcohol is going through, and you got your mental game, and you're explaining everything away, but what you're not seeing is physical and mental warp. Okay, so physical and mental warp. What happens is the alcohol actually hijacks your brain. It takes over. And now it says, hey, and let me know if you can relate because I sure as hell can. You want to go get a hamburger because you're starving, or do you want to drink a fifth of booze? And my brain goes, I'll take the booze. And you're like, what? Like, this dude hasn't eaten in days. And he's hungry. And somehow his body and mind is saying what's against all normal, rational thought. And he'll take the booze instead of the food? Oh, well, hey, you know, you got your third DUI. You're going to get fired from your job. And we're going to amputate your leg if you keep drinking. Let me think about it. What? Let me think about it. Like, you're going to lose. What's wrong with you? And you might say to yourself, what the hell's wrong with me? What's wrong with you is your brain is hijacked. Your brain has been overridden and your body has been overridden by alcohol. And now you have what's called chemical dependency. And you are now feel like you're dependent on the alcohol. Now, in addition to this, what you have is all of this is trying to be explained away. And your mind's like, why the fuck am I like this? What the hell's the matter with me? What's going on? And you haven't seen all this stuff. So you're just like, am I weak-willed? Am I like, do I just like booze and don't like hamburgers? Am I not hungry right now? Is it because of my mental upbringing? What is it? And you're trying to explain it, but boom, you're not thinking about this stuff. And when this happens, think about that hierarchy of needs, right? Food, shelter, booze. Or actually, booze, food, shelter is probably how it is. You've seen people who drink themselves into homelessness, people who drink themselves into starvation. What's that?
That's the way it gets.
It does.
Booze just moves up that ladder.
It does. And the consequences are not enough sometimes.
Right.
Nothing's enough sometimes because you need to realize it. And I believe, and my dream goal for this channel, for TalkSober.com, for everything like that, is to educate you. Because I think if you know what's going on, that's half the battle. Because I lived, and Terry probably lived that way too, where most of our life was up here. We're like, why the reasons? What's going on? Maybe if I watch Dr. Phil while I drink, I'll get better. Maybe if I read enough books. Maybe if I listen to Tony Robbins, I'll be able to quit drinking. But again and again, I can't outthink it. Why can't I outthink it? Well, all of this is going on. Terry, you want to share a little bit about your experience with that?
With, just trying to quit drinking? Is that what you're saying?
Like the mental game, and then like what happened in your life when you understood what was really going on?
Well, so for me, I thought I knew I had to quit drinking. I knew that I was an alcoholic. I didn't really know what that meant all the way. I did need to get some education, but it really wasn't quite enough, the education. I really had to start doing things. But as far as my drinking went, every day I thought, well, this is my last bottle. And then I'd drink, and that craving would set in, and I'd drink until oblivion that day. And then, I'd wake up the next day with that and do the same thing, where I'd wake up in the middle of the night to refresh my buzz. Yeah. And I just went on and on that way with that circle of alcoholism. And eventually, I really don't know what it was, but I admitted to other people that I was an alcoholic, and they got me into a rehab. Mm-hmm. And then I went into that rehab, and they educated us, and they taught us what alcoholism was, and how it's an obsession of the mind and a compulsion of the body. And we learned all these things, and we learned many tools on how to stay sober. And we got sober, and I got out of there, and I thought I was all set, but I didn't continue to work on my sobriety in those early stages, and I thought one drink was a good idea. Mm-hmm. And then it ended up, obviously, it ended up being a bottle a day or more than that. Mm-hmm. And for me, that education was big, but what I didn't do is I didn't really work on my sobriety on a daily basis And it wasn't that I had to fight the sobriety. I just had to do something positive that reminded me of my alcoholism, and that I needed to do other things, get out of my head just a little bit,
Mhm.
and do positive things for myself. I had no plan at all when I got out of the rehab. And so there I was in the same situation. I was in a home, all by myself, isolated, and didn't reach out to any other people, or any, didn't read, didn't study, didn't I did go to meetings. I thought that's what you had to do, and that's all I did. But I
Mhm.
started drinking again because I kept everything else in my life the same. And then when I finally quit again, I did change everything in my life. And I've been able to stay sober since then. And it was, I have to say it was difficult, but at the same time, it wasn't that difficult. It wasn't as difficult as staying drunk all the time, that's for
It's
sure.
true.
I
Yeah.
mean, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and it's
no,
interesting because one thing that I heard that's very similar with what I did, obviously because we went to the same place, was the fact that we learned the tools while we were sober,
right,
right? So it wasn't like we were learning because I learned a lot of stuff when I was drinking, but the problem is it was going to the drunk brain, right? And your drunk brain, again, it's like alcohol, food, survival, right? And it's like really alcohol was the most important. And I wasn't able to learn above that because it's like if I was to teach you how to start a business and get rich, and all you're doing is trying to figure out how to eat every day, you're not going to hear what I'm saying. You're not going to learn because you are focused on how do I eat today? How do I eat today? How do I eat today? Same thing with alcohol. If I try to teach you things like this is how you stay sober, here's what you're going to do, and you continue to drink, you're trying to get the sober mind or the drunk mind to learn sober things, and it's not going to work. It's like I think it was Einstein who said, "The thinking that got us where we're at isn't going to be the same thinking that takes us where we need to go." So the thinking that got you drunk, the thinking that brought you where you're at, is not the same thinking you need to be sober. So we got to get new thoughts in, and like Terry says, you got to focus on what you're doing because the best thing you can do is replace, right? And I think that a lot of people who relapse, they never really replace their drinking and their feelings and stuff like that with positive, right? They're just like, okay, well, I got rid of the drinking thing. And like someone said on here, well, I think that if I don't have booze, life's going to be boring. Well, if you don't replace it, yeah, like if you just sit there wondering why can't I have booze when you used to drink, then yeah, life's going to suck. However, I would like to challenge that thought and ask you, when has alcohol ever made something more fun? Like when? Like other than like going to work. Maybe that's a little more fun when you're drinking. I don't know, maybe. Not really, though. Now I have a lot more fun working because I'm more productive. But really look at it like, oh, I went water skiing drunk. Okay, was it really that much more fun? Or were you just, did you think it was fun? Because you had your security blanket or you thought funny things or whatever it is. And I would challenge you to say that it probably isn't that more fun, that much more fun. I think it's probably an illusion. And when we look at that, it's like, you know, the activities you do are fun anyway. And without alcohol, they're going to be just as more fun because you're going to be present in them. Now, you might not have your drinking buddies to go to the local pub with or your drinking buddies to come watch football with. But again, you got to deal with your problem, right? I guarantee life's going to get better if you focus on the right things, focus on living presently. But that's really what we got to look at is this is what's going on, right? And if you found yourself where you're like, I want to quit, but I can't, or I want to quit, but I think I can, try it out. See if you can go January without drinking. Let us know how it goes. If you find yourself going back and you're like, I tried, but for some reason I keep going back. Don't get down on yourself. Come back and look at the truth of what's going on. Behind the iceberg, you have made yourself dependent on a chemical. And that's what it's going to do. Now, when you relapse, what happens is a lot of people who relapse, right, they don't figure this stuff out. So they take the drink and they're like, man, I'm just going to have this one drink because I'm thirsty or I'm bored or I'm hungry or I'm tired or whatever reason you give yourself up here. You take that drink. Now, that drink probably doesn't do a whole lot in terms of like anything major physically, but that one drink is going to activate that part that says, boom, we are back to alcohol, food, survival. Boom, boom, boom. And that's why a lot of people, they're like, hey, when I relapse, it's worse than ever. It's like I just reactivated the whole thing, and it's like I never quit. It's like I just picked up again, right? I was dry for 12 years, and I just picked up again, and boom, you're off to the races. Why? Because it's activating all this stuff. And it's like, boom, there you go, right? Because a solution in your brain never gets overridden. Never. It gets replaced with something better, right? So if you're not replacing the solution of alcohol with something better, then you're always going to come back to it and be like, hey, well, shit, girlfriend broke up with me. Let's go to the bottle. But if you figure something else out, like, Terry, tell us some of the things that you do when you're like, this kind of sucks, and I know a solution that used to work, but instead I'm going to do this.
You know, the first thing I do is I always I just sit back and basically take those 15 minutes that we talk about in the letters.
Mm-hmm.
So I pause. And that's usually the most important thing, is pausing, and then it allows me to look at the situation and determine what I have to do in a proper way. So instead of reacting, you know, I figure out what I need to do. That's what's most effective for me. As far as other tools, is trying to help somebody, do these webinars, keep myself busy. Physical activity. There's lots of things that one can do throughout the day, and I try not to do the old bad habits, which is isolate and you know, sit there and dwell on the things that are bothering me so much. You still have to deal with the problems, but pausing usually makes a big difference. You know, I remember when I was going through a divorce. I remember that we'd email, our form of communication was email, and I'd get an email that made me mad, and I'd write a response, and I think I did it a couple of times. I wrote the response and sent it, and I was like, oh my God, what did I just say? And then what I decided was, I'm going to wait till tomorrow. I'm going to write the response today, and I'm going to wait till tomorrow to respond. And that's what I did, and every single time, 100% of the time, I changed my response entirely. And that's because I paused and thought about things. And rather than reacting in an angry way, I was able to respond in a much more positive way. And that's much the same with drinking. And sometimes, like, if I'm going to a party and there's alcohol there, you know, I show up on time. And I've said this a ton of times in the webinars, but you see this point where it's time to go, and I'm usually one of the first people to leave. But I understand that. That's why I get to the parties on time, and, you know, say goodbye to the hosts and be polite, and then leave. Usually they know that I don't drink, and they probably pick up on it when I'm not drinking during the party. But that's another effective tool, is just being able to walk away. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, there's many other things that just going slow, not trying to get everything done at once. Try to keep the pressure down in my life, and that seems to be another great tool to use. Is just not have to stress out about stuff. Yeah. It's a change in mindset for me. I used to constantly think about what I was going to do.
Yeah.
And constantly think about the alcohol. I had to do this. I had to get this done. I have to get that done. My mind has been kind of reprogrammed, and I don't stress about these things anymore. I do what I can do. That's all I can do. And then what other people are going to think of me, that's their problem. It's not my problem.
Yeah. And I think too, like, if I look at my sobriety, I have years of today's. Like, what are you going to do to stay sober? I'm not going to drink today. Well, I don't know how I'm going to make it to 10 years or 5 years or get the golden chip or whatever. Doesn't matter. What matters is, what are you going to do today, right? I got in a fight with the spouse. Okay, I'm not going to drink. Let's see if I can make it through it, right? Let's just see let's see, because I think I'm probably going to catch on fire if I don't go drink, right? And that's what my mind wants me to think, because again, alcohol, food, survival. It's like, got to have the alcohol. You're going to combust if you don't have the alcohol. And so my mind would go to it and be like, we got to have it. But instead, I'm like, let's sit here. And then after 15 minutes, I find out that I didn't spontaneously combust or burst out into flames. And it trains my brain, hey, you're going to be okay. You can make it through this. And that's what it's about, is retraining your brain. You can do all these things without alcohol. So if you want to make it and make a dry January, go for it. But again, remember, if you find yourself struggling, focus on the stuff that's going on behind the surface, because beneath the surface, you have all this stuff that your mind and your body is saying is important, but it's really not that important. It's just saying it because now you are chemically hooked. Now, again, for those of you who do want to try to get sober, if you've been drinking more than the websites say, I think it's like 7 a week for women and 13 a week for men or something like that. Again, go there and look it up. I'm not a doctor. Terry's not a doctor. And always, when you're trying to get sober, if you've been drinking any amount, go to the doctor and tell them what's going on, because detox can be deadly. And detox is another thing that keeps us drunk. Trying to detox keeps us drunk. I know Terry's story. Like, he was like scared to death of detox. I was scared to death of detox, scared to death of being sober. But I found out, hey, you know what? After a week, I'm good.
Yeah.
1 week, start to feel better. This stuff is still going on, but it's not so much physical. Now it's the mental game. But you cannot fight the mental game if your body is physically thinking it needs alcohol. You can't do it. It's not going to happen. I don't care how strong you are. I don't care how many books you read. Your mind and your body, if they're not in sync, if they're not both sober, you're not going to be able to do this, because it's going to say, hey, I need alcohol, I need alcohol, I need alcohol, I need alcohol, I need alcohol. You guys have all heard that over and over, and that's what you got to focus on. So let's take some of the questions here. Again, if you guys do need to get sober, I highly recommend and urge you and tell you, go to the doctor, tell them what you're doing, just to be safe during detox.
Yeah. Hey, so Evan put down earlier, I can be sober for about 4 to 5 months, and then bam, back again. The resolutions don't last for me. And then Evan, you said a little bit later, the way I do my drinking is like a science. I know exactly how many days I need to detox after my bender, and I've practiced it so much. I try not to go beyond 5-day benders. It's all math to me, but I need to stop. There's coming a gradual ending here sometime, and yeah. So, you know, I've seen this quite a bit, seen quite a few people that were binge drinkers in this exact way. Mm-hmm. And what generally happened with them, and I don't know if this would be you, but what generally happens with them is that their benders get worse and worse, and the time between these binges get less and less. And these are people that said the same thing to me. It's math. Yeah. They know exactly how long they can drink, or how long they have to detox for, and they have it down until they don't. And that's generally what happens to them. Do you have any comment for that, Marcus?
Well, I mean, you're here, which means you don't like what you're doing. What you're doing is causing some kind of discomfort, some kind of issues in your life. And binge drinking is extremely dangerous, because you're constantly detoxing. Like, right. For me, I was never a binge drinker because I fucking hated detoxing.
Yeah.
Like, I did not want it. I was a chicken shit when it came to detox. So that's a very, very dangerous thing to be doing. For me, I would try to quit. I guess towards the end, I would probably be kind of a binge drinker, because it was like I'd go 3 weeks off, and then, you know, I'd hit it again. But again, you know, you're messing up your body, you're messing up your mind, and you're never really allowing yourself time to think soberly. You're never allowing yourself time to rebuild the pathways that have been built that say alcohol is the solution for everything. And when you find yourself difficult to stop, that's why. Like, if you try to get sober with a drunk mind, it's not going to work. That's why so many people need outside help. They're like, hey, you know what? I got to go to a rehab, or I got to do this, because now you're in the trap. and you can't outthink it with a drunk mind, right? It's like trying to talk to someone. You've always been with someone who's drunk, and you're trying to rationalize with the drunk person, and that never works. You can't rationalize with the drunk person. That's kind of what's happening. You're just a little less obvious. Us alcoholics are a little less obvious than some others. We have our ways about it, but you got to look at it and say, how am I going to get my mind back on track? How am I going to focus on this? Because here's the deal. Oh, I only binge every couple of weeks. I got it down to a science. I got all this shit. I got this going on, and I can't stop binging, but I'm not an alcoholic because I just binge. Fuck that. Yeah, you are an alcoholic because you can't stop. The definition is negative consequences in your life, inability to stop. Those are them. Like, okay, well, I have one this month and one the next month. Okay, can you stop? No. I don't care if it's 1 or 50. If you can't stop, that's the deal. Now, there's the difference between don't want to stop, because there's some people who drink and they're like, whatever, I just don't want to stop for whatever reason. I got family members who they can drink normally fine. They don't attend little webinars like this. They don't go and look for ways to quit because it's not an issue in their life. So consequences and ability to stop. Can you stop? Can you stop binging? Okay, well, I only do it once a month. Okay, good. Stop for a year. Don't drink anything for a year. See how that goes for you. Go to the doctor, tell them what you've been doing, because your body's been like, alcohol, no alcohol, alcohol, no alcohol, alcohol, no alcohol, and, that's not good. But look at it, right? Can you stop for a year and focus on that?
That's it's a hard thing to, from my point of view, I was not a binge drinker either, but that's got to be hard, binge drinking at an alcoholic level. I just don't see how I would personally justify my drinking the entire time, just because of some of the reasons that I hear all the time is, I can go 3-4 weeks without drinking.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Now, as a disclaimer, I only did that about 3 to 4 times when I was trying to quit. Like it was never like a binge type. Like I was never like, I'm a binge drinker, that's what I do. I was more like, I'm quitting for good this time, and then 3 weeks later I'd start drinking again.
I binged about every hour.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, you're really screwing up your mind, your body. That's when my detox was the worst, was when I was on and off trying to quit, because your mind would get used to like no alcohol, and then you dump gallons in it, and you start seeing shit and hearing shit, and got to go to the doctor, and go to the doctor even if you don't see and hear shit, because alcohol sucks. But that's what you want to look at. Okay, let's take a couple others here.
Yeah, Walter says, I just accepted I'm an alcoholic. Mine came from severe PTSD and anxiety due to being a Marine vet. It got to the point where I couldn't function without it because of panic attacks. And I've seen that a lot as well. And I felt much the same way, that I couldn't function without alcohol. And I thought that the alcohol was helping me. But all it really did for me was push off these feelings. And the feelings would, when I'd sober up, the feelings would come back worse. And then I'd try to drink to push them down again. And thus that cycle would continue. And, Walter, it's awesome that you're here. You just accepted that you're an alcoholic. So that's another good step. And the fact that you're watching this. And
I would also say
it's important.
I would also say for Walter, there is a video on this channel. It was done about 1.5 years ago on this book, The Body Keeps the Score. It's a book about trauma and PTSD. Now, I was informally diagnosed with PTSD. I don't know. I mean, it was a therapist with credentials, but she was kind of weird, so I say informal. But it wasn't as bad as war stuff. I'll say that straight up. It's like my stuff was not even close. I don't know what I would do if I was in war-type PTSD. So I just want to give credit to, hey, I know you're going through something that I probably can't understand the magnitude of, but that book's really good. And I think understanding where your body keeps stuff, because when the body goes through trauma, it stores stuff throughout the body. And that's why, sometimes when things happen, you get scared, you get frightened, you start to see things as they were, because your body is always in protection mode and your mind's always in protection mode. And that's what happens. It's like, hear a loud noise, boom, you want to go get protected, or protect yourself or whatever it is. And we can learn ways of coming back to, hey, you know what, I'm back home now and it's going to be okay. And that's a good video to watch. I would check that out. And also maybe check out, there might be some veteran sobriety groups that could be good. Check those out because, a lot of people will relate. I think in every sobriety meeting I've been in, there's been someone who's been military. So I know there's always something, so you can find them as well.
Right.
But yeah, panic attacks are a pain. We got them rampant in my family. And, there's things you can do. Again, the 15-minute thing to tell yourself, hey, I'm in the comfort of my own home right now. It's going to be okay. It's a chemical flare-up because what happens is the way that the mind works is it produces chemicals, right? I get scared. My body produces, I think it's cortisol or something like that, which is like the fight or flight. I'm going to run away.
Right.
And it gives you that jolt. You're like, shit, I'm glad I have the cortisol because now I can run away from the bear or whatever is going to get me. But when we're sitting and we have a panic attack, our body's getting flooded with all these chemicals and we start to feel crazy. And then the chemicals start to remind us of things that happen, memories, different stuff like that start getting activated. And it's very difficult to deal with if you don't understand, hey, there's a chemical reaction. Like I know anxiety is going to be off the chart and I could probably guarantee a panic attack if I start drinking regular coffee in excess. Now I drink decaf, but if I drink regular, I know that starts to mess with the chemicals. And remembering that a lot of our body stuff is chemical. We're just like chemical beings and stuff like that. So I think that might help as well.
Yeah. Hey, Alex, good job. A week strong. THC gamer. I think I already mentioned it. You got 12 days. You strung together 12 days so far. That's good. DXM2, ninth day sober. Awesome job. Let's see. Evan said, let's go down to THC. I agree. THC is addicting. Oh, somebody must have said something about marijuana.
Yeah, I think it was Evan said he tried the weed thing. They were talking about weed as a way to deal with. I find, again, marijuana affects my brain, so I'm not really in charge of whether I drink or not. And I know that nothing chases down a good reefer or whatever the kids call it these days as alcohol. So, I choose to stay away from it. I know that it has lots of medicinal properties and it's good and, talk to your doctor, figure out what's right for you. But for me personally, I want to be sober of as much as I can. So not my favorite thing. And also, I found that towards the end of my sobriety, weed made me really anxious, like insanely anxious, like jump out of my skin anxious. So, to each his own.
I love the feeling that weed gave me, but for me, being sober is being 100% sober, and I don't know if it's going to trigger me or not. I've heard many different opinions on that, but I'm not willing to risk it. And that's I've heard that you hear the reports. A glass of wine every day is good for you. Well, no, it's not good for me because I'll have to drink 15 more. So,
I know I've had enough to have a glass of wine every day for the rest of my life already. So
exactly.
I should be the most healthy person alive, right?
and yeah, they talk about the medicinal qualities of marijuana, and I don't dispute those at all. But for me, no, it's not for me. Just like alcohol is not for me. I have to stay away from it. I'll have to find other ways to stay healthy.
Very true. Yeah, and it's. I don't know, it makes me lazy, makes me not want to do anything, and I'm lazy and don't want to do anything as it is, so adding that is kind of like, probably not a good idea. But to each his own. And again, this channel is about alcohol specifically, so maybe check out some other materials on, pot or whatever, but ours is specifically for alcohol, so...
The Commodore had something for me here. He or she said, "Do you feel your past relationship ended solely because of alcohol? I've been sober for 3 months. combined with a relationship ending. Alcohol was the final trigger for breakup. I don't blame relationship breakups or my problems on alcohol. Alcohol is definitely a contributing factor,
Mm-hmm.
and but my problems were because of me, and that's about as deep as I'm going to go into that. But I am the one that caused the problems.
Yeah.
I have my part in every issue in my life, and how big or how small it is that's for me to figure out. But alcohol was absolutely a factor, but it was not the cause.
Let's see here. THC says I was bullied in different ways. So was I, being 5 feet tall at the end of high school and 4'8" when you went into high school. I don't know where my wife went to high school or where kids today go to high school, but it was like you might as well just go ask to get beat up if you were short. And that's kind of how it was for me. In addition, I was bullied at home as well. So he says he's a little timid. He learned he was passive aggressive, and now he's a defensive firecracker. The key is to remember that you're not in that place anymore, right? Like I go to school functions with my kids, and maybe that's part of the reason I get anxious. The other part is probably because it's a church school, and my other trauma was around churches, so it's like a match made in heaven. But I tell myself, hey, look, you know what? You're an adult now. You're not going to get bullied, and, things are probably going to be okay now. And take your 15 minutes and realize, hey, you know what? I'm going to be okay. I love now, 4.5 years sober, that I don't have to drink to go take my kids to school, right? It sounds terrible, and it was. Luckily, I wasn't the one who drove them to school. But I don't have to do that. Like, I don't have to show up at the Christmas play half-wasted because I can't hang. It wasn't because I thought I needed to drink or whatever. It was because I didn't know how to deal with my anxiety
Right.
around schools and churches and things like that. But I think the key is to accept, hey, good job, me. You saved yourself from the stuff in the past, but you no longer need these things. Much the same with PTSD. You're always on the defensive. You're always on protective mode. And it's like, okay, well, back in America here, don't really need that right now. Thank you for protecting me when I needed it, but right now I don't really need it. And I certainly don't need to drink it away too. So we got to look at that. Let's take a look at, Evan says, did we read that one? Just relapsed after December, after 5 months?
Um, that was Evan?
Yeah.
I'm not finding it.
Okay.
But
I don't remember if we did that
in
one
the
or
meantime,
not.
let's say good job, Richard. 129 days sober.
Awesome. And Meg, good to see you here.
Yeah.
Meg said, when I went to the doctor, all they did was give me a bunch of prescription and benzos. All right, when you go to the doctor, you want to tell them what you're okay with and not okay with. For me, and I remember Big Dave in rehab, he wouldn't even take painkillers at the doctor. He's like, just rip the tooth out, man. And I'm like, wow, okay, yeah. I'm probably a wuss and wouldn't do that. But he was like, I'm not going to do it because I know I could get hooked. So some people go to that extreme. For me, I'm like, okay, give me what I need, but that's it. Like for me personally, my rule is like, I'll take it when I'm there under doctor supervision, but don't give me anything when I go home. When I go home, I'll try to tough it out or whatever. But again, Meg, when you go to the doctor, say, look, I am an alcoholic. I'm an addict. And for those that don't know, benzos taken not as directed, or however you take them that isn't directed, are pretty fucked up. They're not good. That's another one where the detox is just messed up. So yeah, I would say, listen to what your doctor says, what he says to take, go get a second opinion, or tell him, say, look, dude, I don't want benzos. Is there another way? And there's another way because, some of this stuff hasn't been invented for years. So, again, talk to them, though, because they know, and be straight up with them. Don't just sit and be like, yes, give me whatever. Because I've gone to doctors, and they're like, hey, are you sad? Here, take this. And I'm like, well, I could be sad because my cat just ran away. Doesn't mean I need to take something, right? So make sure you follow up and make sure you spend some time there. Like your insurance or you're paying for the doctor visit. Tell them, this is what's going on. I'm an addict. I'm an alcoholic. I'm worried about this stuff. Okay, well, you should try this. Well, is there another way? And talk to them. Now, have you ever had experience with that, Terry, where it's like, here, take this stuff?
Oh, yeah, I have, and I pretty much didn't, but I don't want to tell people to not follow doctors' directions.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
it's super
definitely.
important to listen to what they're saying.
And I would
Um,
say ask them.
Ask them
Ask them.
exactly.
Say, look, do I have to, like, am I going to, like,
The
have a
most important
problem if
thing
I don't take
is
this?
you just got to be honest.
Yeah.
Be honest about everything, and once you're honest about it, your doctor can give you good advice, and
Mm-hmm.
then you can follow it.
Yep.
That's that's it. It's that simple. I see Evan's comment now. That's what I was looking at. Sorry, I lost focus a little bit.
That's all right. Also, second opinion is good. But for me personally, I would watch out for that because I know I'm prone. I know that if I was prescribed some kind of benzo, that's the feeling I was addicted to with alcohol. It's just like a lot more messed up of a feeling. So I would probably get addicted to that. I know painkillers probably are something that I would get addicted to. So when I go in for doctor stuff, I'm like, hey, this is the way it is. I know my body. You know, you might
Benzo.
know the drugs and stuff, but I know my body. Is there a different way? And do some research on your own and take that research in. You know, and if you're worried about something, don't just blindly, do whatever. Like, go in and say, hey, look, I'm worried about this. And 9 times out of 10, they will help you, or go to a specialist. Another thing that's good for that, Meg, I would probably recommend for you is like get a sponsor and bounce some things off of them. Now, make sure they're reputable. Some sponsors I've had, well, I tried two and I worked for like a week. One was like a total crackpot, and the other was an okay guy. It just didn't work. But be careful because even in sobriety, like sponsor people, they're not God, right? So you got to take this. Doctors, they know stuff, but you know you. So follow it along. Listen to the doctor. Ask him, hey, what's going to happen if I don't take it? That's a great question for a doctor if you're looking at something and they're like, hey, you need this. What's going to happen if I don't? Well, you'll probably be okay. Maybe you can try this instead. Okay, I'd like to do that because I'm an addict. What do you think? Well, I
Right.
think that might work. Okay, good. Now you go along your way. So hopefully that helps.
Being straight up. That's
Yeah,
important.
very important. All right, let's take a couple others here.
We got. Let's see. Oh, we just did that one. Yellow says, I never went more than 30 days with my addiction. And then you say, about the math of it, the problem is alcoholism is a disease that literally gets progressively worse no matter what you try to, no matter how you try to control it. And
Mm-hmm.
that is true, Yellow. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Alcoholism will get worse. It'll even get worse when you quit. Is if that happens to some people when they start again, it's like they never quit. They never stop drinking.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem with it. We think we're good. We think we're fine without alcohol. We've gone 1 year, 5 year, 10 years. I've seen it. I've seen people with a couple decades sober and they start drinking and they're right where they left off.
Mm-hmm.
I was with this other person um, yesterday and they were talking about how they had 20 years of sobriety and they were heavily involved in sober activities and had all these friends. And then they moved to Puerto Vallarta
Mm-hmm.
and they were surrounded by alcohol. And one day they just thought that that one drink would be good. And they had that one drink and then they didn't have the consequences right away. They weren't suddenly craving.
Mm-hmm.
After a month or so, they started drinking more and they thought they were good. And a couple months, they were drinking a lot. And she said that she was back to where she was, back to her old levels of drinking. And but her in the back of her mind, she thought, well, I could just quit anytime and I'll be fine. But it ended up that not being the case. It took her a long time to finally quit again, and she's strung together about a year and a half now. But she said it was very, very difficult to get to quit again. It was just because when she started drinking again, everybody she knew that she didn't drink, so she had to hide it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was more difficult to get that help from the outside because that would mean she'd have to make herself out in the open. And tell everybody she'd been lying all along and hurt that ego. So yeah, it does get progressively worse. What
Yeah.
else we got here?
Let's see. Let's see.
We
Uh,
got you already took the panic attack one.
yeah,
Uh,
I think we're about up to speed on those, and we're about out of time. So let's see. Are there any last minute ones that anyone just needs to get off their chest or anything like that? And yes, people tell me I look like that guy all the time. I also get who's the actor that plays Sam on Lord of the Rings? I get him a lot too.
oh yeah, yeah. I don't know
Yeah,
names that well.
me
Linda, good
neither.
job. Joined the group today. One day today is what you're saying. Great.
Cool.
That's awesome. One day's huge.
It
That's what I
is.
got too. One day plus
Me too.
a couple few more.
Yeah, cool. All right, guys. So I think we're ready to wrap it up. But again, remember, if you're looking to go through January, if you've been drinking a lot, go see a doctor. Listen to them. Be honest with your doctor. Tell them what's going on. Tell them, hey, I'm worried about being addicted to this stuff. So, what do you recommend? And do your research. Look into things. Um, if you are detoxing, go to the doctor. Tell them you're detoxing. Check it out and everything like that. Meg, reach out to us on talksober.com. We could probably help you find some help in your area or something like that. If you guys do want to support the channel, go to talksober.com, click on the big button that says support. You can help us out here. You get a bunch of PDFs, you get a bunch of audio recordings, and when Terry and I get around to it, you'll also get like a really cool software thing we've been working on for you. But either way, you get a lot of good stuff, and I find that the MP3s are worth it because you can take them with you. And I think that's really important to be able to do is have these talks when you need them, not just when you're feeling good or when you happen to be on the YouTube or whatever, but when you need them. So if you do want to support it, go to talksober.com, click the big button under the video that says support us. You'll get all those downloads and everything. And, you can reach out to us as well on that site if you guys need some personal help or anything like that. And we'll try to help you out as best we can. Again, remember, we're not doctors, but we have, I think, combined about 10 years of sobriety, which is cool, and a lot of failures, which I think you can learn a lot more from your failures than you can your successes. That's not to say go fail on purpose, but hey, learn from our failures and be really smart. So thanks again for watching. Here's to a new year. If you want to have a dry January, again, remember, the mental game's up here, but there's a lot of shit going on behind the surface. And if you don't deal with that, it's going to be very difficult. Any last minute thoughts there, Terry?
No, we've covered quite a bit today. Thank you, everybody. Try to stay sober, or stay sober.
Yep.
Make it a dry January, and then the rest of the year. And thanks for all your comments, you guys. We really appreciate it, and we want to hear more comments from you so we can better serve you guys and answer what you guys are having issues with. Thank you.
All right. Talk soon. Or talk sober, I should say.